Welcome to Pound for Pound Sports, everybody. I'm Nick Eustace.
And I'm Jason Eismo, filling in for Daren Andersen. He is on the DL right now, like a lot of the UFC fighters. The bug has caught up to PFP Sports, and now we got a guy that's down for a week.
Absolutely. Big ups, Daren. We hope you get well soon. Hope you're back next week. I got to throw out our website, pfpsports.com. It's like a newspaper. It's like looking at the front page every day. If you want to know anything that's going on in boxing, combat sports in general, that's where you'll find it. Last but certainly not least, our favorite sponsor, Blake, alphadognutrition.com, for all your supplements, muscle builders, everything. I mean, they literally do everything over there. I would highly suggest checking out their site, alphadognutrition.com, and check out our Facebook, Pound for Pound Sports. Also, links to our website and everything that's new. We'll jump right into the deep end here. I say that every week. Man, we had such a busy weekend if you're a fight fan. I mean, you had boxing, you had two major UFC events, and, to tell you the truth, you don't even realize how much there is out there until you try to prepare and do a show for something like that. I mean, you're trying to, do your thing for 10, 12 fights or better, and, Babalu even fought, Fedor fought.
Yeah.
I mean, we had like 4 or 5 different promotions going on there. Just a crazy busy week. UFC on FX4, in a lot of ways kind of overshadowed UFC 147 just in terms of talent.
Yeah. Just people that you knew.
People that you knew, but you know what? I more or less expected that from the FX card. I mean, they've been putting out such quality fights and such amazing matchmaking for some of those things they're giving away on TV, and in a lot of ways it kind of makes it tough to justify buying a pay-per-view that you're kind of on the fence about simply because you got your money's worth the night before. And
when it comes down to it, though, you don't want to miss it. You're going to buy it. You're going to get the pay-per-view because you don't want to miss it.
Yeah, I drink that Kool-Aid every time.
Yeah.
I do it every single time. So we'll just dive right in. UFC on FX4. We went out. I went out of the limb. I think Daren picked Ross Pearson. I picked Cub Swanson. Either one, I thought, had a great chance to win this fight. A great example of matchmaking by Joe Silva. What was the biggest thing to you? First off, who did you pick, and what was the biggest thing you noticed in the fight?
I picked Ross Pearson. I was surprised he got knocked out. I've never been a big fan of Cub Swanson. I was surprised, actually. I did not think that, Cub Swanson's not known for his knockout power anyways.
No.
And I was surprised that he knocked him out.
He had a lot of ups and downs in his career. I said last week that this was more or less a career-defining moment for him. I thought that the camp that he was in would hopefully make the difference in that fight. It looks like it did. He actually looked very, very technical. You look at he was throwing feints, head movement, just amazing footwork. I think even at the end of the first round he attempted a capoeira kick. I mean, just totally out of the blue. I mean, something you just don't see. He really looked comfortable out there. Ross Pearson, though, he was a threat anywhere he went. He was technical in his own right. I mean, he was also using feints. He was just using a lot of good technical boxing. Really showcased his power. That guy, despite I think he had like 3 or 4 takedowns, he ended up losing that fight, TKO. A lot of people really didn't expect that. Cub Swanson, the epitome of a sleeping dog. I think he was a 2.5 to 1 underdog. So a lot of people got paid on that one. Big time win for Cub Swanson. I thought honestly with the loss, probably going to be on his way out.
That might have been his last fight in the UFC for a while, anyways. But that was a big win for him. Big win for Cub.
Huge win. He gets the invite to come back. So Ross Pearson, I don't think you could. Take anything away from that guy in this fight. I mean, it's not like the guy looked bad. I mean, like I said, he was a threat to win the fight anywhere it went.
Right.
That guy looked legit. He was game. Sometimes that's just how they fall. I mean, it was a good example of matchmaking. Somebody had to lose. I look for Ross Pearson to be back on the horse.
Didn't Ross Pearson just get popped for DUI a little while ago? Do you think that affected him at all?
You know what? I don't know. To be honest with you, punishment's really not that bad. Don't ask me how I know that, but the punishment's really not as bad as you think.
During your camp and stuff, it takes you off, I don't know.
It might.
Mentally anyway.
It might. It could take away. I mean, like I said, sometimes things in life happen, and, everybody comes in there, hurting on some level or having to overcome something, but... like I said, I didn't look at Ross Pearson's performance and think, man, this guy's missing something. I didn't get that impression at all.
He just got beat. It happens.
Absolutely. Moving on to the next fight, TJ Waldberger, Brian Ebersol. This is a fight that we really didn't talk about a lot last week. Sometimes, like I said, you're trying to talk 10, 12 fights. There's only time for so much.
Right.
Last week, I don't want to say I was a huge fan of Brian Ebersol, but the guy's very intriguing. The guy's a very unorthodox style. That guy has over 50 professional fights. That's a lot of
fights.
People don't realize. I mean, that guy's been everywhere. And you look at that fight, it was pretty evident in that fight. I mean, experience really paid dividends in that fight. TJ Waldberger, I mean, have you ever seen a more active guard from anybody in your life? I mean, that guy was transitioning from butterfly to rubber guard. I mean, the guy, I've never seen a more active guard in recent memory, honest to God. Brian Ebersol, he was in a few bad spots. I mean, he got caught a few times, but he was able to stay out of it.
He had a rough first round, and but he was able to come back. And Ebersol's a little bit about the shtick, but
oh yeah, I definitely got that impression too. I definitely got that impression.
But it was a good fight and good win.
Absolutely. He was, just like I said, he even had some really unorthodox takedowns, just a very elusive guy. I think the decision was absolutely right. He was in a lot of trouble. Clearly that first round was Wahlberger's, and probably, I would say, the better part of the beginning of that second round. I mean, he really, that window was closing for him to right that fight, and he did. He did it in time, and I absolutely agree with the decision. Next fight, Spencer Fisher, Sam Stout, that was the rubber match. Talk about another sleeping dog, and Spencer Fisher, that guy was a huge underdog in this fight, despite the fact that he does have a win over Sam Stout. I mean, was there any surprises there in that fight?
No surprise. I thought it was a really good fight when I first heard about this fight. I've always been a Spencer Fisher fan my whole life. For some reason, I'm not sure why, ever since I've seen him fight.
Confident.
When I heard about this fight first, I was like, ho hum, who cares? It's not, what does it matter? But sometimes it's just nice to have a good fight. They don't all have to. I've always said in the past, what does this mean and what's next for either one of these guys? Sometimes, who cares? It's just nice to see two guys that are going to put on a good fight, and that's what it was. It was a good fight, a really good fight.
No question about that. And I thought, with the matchmaking, it was a good example of guys that were kind of tailor-made for each other to look good. I thought the one key to victory for Spencer Fisher would have, he can't get outstruck early on, and he didn't. He actually, in fact, not only did he not get outstruck, he set the high pace early, and Spencer Fisher looked about as good as we've ever seen him.
Yeah.
That's the funny thing. I mean, he was talking retirement. He wanted this rubber match. I don't know, it's like I want to see you always want to see everybody go out on a high limb, but I can't take anything away from Spencer Fisher in this fight at all.
No.
I wouldn't be surprised to see him back.
Sam Stout improved his takedowns. I mean, he added that to his game.
Good point.
And that was much different from their previous fights. That was another element that I wasn't ready for, to be honest with you. I thought it was just going to be a slugfest.
Yeah, I thought this. Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, because I actually thought that Sam Stout, key to victory for him would have been, we want to keep it standing. Don't mix in any wrestling. We don't want to go to the ground with Fisher. Not that Fisher is world-renowned black belt, but I thought that being on the ground for Stout would have posed problems.
Exactly, and it didn't.
And sometimes that's hard. It's hard to pick fights, because on paper, maybe this is a mistake, or this guy's a sleeping dog, or maybe he's a favorite. But sometimes guys actually improve things and they evolve in camp, and that's something you just can't account for. And you look at that in Sam Stout. I mean, that's a great example of that. Moving on to the main event, Clay Guida, Gray Maynard. I don't know if controversy is the right word. Salty might have been the right word. A lot of people are salty after that fight. Gray Maynard was, Dana White was, a lot of the fans were.
In my opinion, it shouldn't have been a split decision. It should have been 50-45 to Gray Maynard. When you compare the strikes and everything, they were so even. But when you watch the fight, it was obvious that only one guy came there to actually win that fight.
Right.
And that was Gray Maynard. Clay Guida was not interested in engaging. He was doing his little Clay Guida dance, but not only was he doing his dance, he's doing a lot of backpedaling and then doing nothing after that, and then just starting it over again. And you could see the frustration on Gray Maynard.
Frustrated.
To the point where he dropped his hands and just said, "Punch me in the face." And I was so upset with the way that fight went down, and
I was confused at the end of the night, because there's a lot of things that I saw different coming into this fight. And we talked about it on Fox Sports Radio about half an hour ago. We broke it down a little bit more, but you see Clay Guida, the hair wasn't a factor. He looked, for the first couple of rounds, like I said, he looked kind of like Alexander Gustafsson with the footwork. I mean, he was on the bicycle all fight, but the difference between him and Gustafsson is that Gustafsson was throwing some crazy combinations. I mean, he was actually engaging. It was a very different fighter. I was confused right through the third round. I mean, you brought up a good point. It might have been a different story if maybe the fight was 3 rounds as opposed to 5. But that's really where I thought after round 3, okay, Gray Maynard is clearly frustrated. This is where he's going to start digging in and exploiting that. And we just didn't see that. And not only did we not see that, but we didn't see any wrestling, really. I thought that was going to be a much bigger factor in this fight, for sure.
We had talked about it earlier. I mean, how many takedown attempts did Guida have? And that's his game. And
that's what he does.
And he just wouldn't engage. It was just a big dance-a-thon for him. And it was frustrating as a fan. It had to be frustrating for Maynard. And the worst thing I think that could have happened for the UFC is if Guida got the victory. If they gave him the decision, that would have been very bad for for UFC, I think.
It would have been bad. You know, it wasn't fighting for a title, but that fight did have implications in the lightweight division. And on top of that, you had a main event. So, I mean, you're on a big stage, you're on, network television. So, yeah, it was a big deal. And that's definitely not, I mean, I could see Dana White's frustration and the company's frustration in that performance, especially, considering a lot of guys sometimes when they get to, a plateau or a bigger stage, sometimes they abandon what got them there in the first place.
Right.
But, like I said, that was a real tough fight. Sometimes you're a little swayed by the people you bet on, and that was the fourth and final leg. I was waiting to come in on my parlay, so I was a little biased to begin with. But when I had a chance to go home and watch the fight a little bit more, I saw a little bit of a different story. The significant strikes landed. The numbers were relatively the same. So really all you have left to go on is ring generalship.
Aggressiveness.
Yes, and there was nothing even remotely aggressive about Clay Guida.
No,
I'm sorry.
No, he just walked. He just walked him down the whole time, and then when he'd get close, he'd just dance away, and it was very frustrating. Very frustrating fight to watch. It had to be a frustrating fight to fight, and hopefully Clay Guida, maybe he learns a little bit, and he I don't expect somebody to come out and just say, let's stand in front of you and let's slug this out if that's not your game. No. I understand the whole game plan, and I understand all of that, but he took it to a whole new level.
That's what Maynard said. He says, listen, I understand if you have to be elusive, you got to, do this or do that, but at some point he's waiting for somebody to engage him.
Got to do something.
And we just, you didn't see that. I mean, I think it's a bit early to hang a guy like Guida out to dry for one bad performance. I mean, Andersen Silva is a great example. I mean, pound for pound best in the world, it's a little bit of a different story, but I mean, he has had instances where we all felt that he could have put somebody away, and he just didn't.
Right.
And, everybody deserves a second chance. Clay Guida was a main eventer for a reason.
I wouldn't put him on the main event next time, that's for sure. I'd make him earn his way back up there.
Yeah, he might be a little bit far away from the main event.
Yeah.
Only time's going to tell with that one. With that, we'll go to UFC 147. This was a card that was really tailor-made for everybody in South America. We didn't expect anything less. We saw some good up-and-coming talent. The co-main event, to be honest with you, I was more impressed with the pretty much everything else leading up to the co-main event as opposed to the co-main event itself. You got Fabricio Werdum, top 10 opponent, legitimately, against Mike Russo. We didn't even get to see any jitsu at all. I mean, I was waiting to see that high guard, that world famous high guard of Fabricio Werdum's, and I think the numbers had something like, I think he won like 33-2 or something. I mean, it was so lopsided it wasn't even funny. And at the end of the day, you can't take anything away from that fight with that kind of performance. I mean, there's just nothing you can do.
Well, yeah. The fact that Werdum all of a sudden became this world-class striker, is it because he's trained and he's improved his striking that much, or was Mike Russo just either not ready, outmatched, or just that bad? I mean, I was so unimpressed with the way Mike Russo looked in this fight.
Yeah.
He looked like a guy they just grabbed off the street, and I think that he probably watched that fight and it probably makes him sick.
Yeah, no, that was a tough performance. He had a lot to overcome. Like I said, there's a big difference fighting a top 10 opponent, fighting him in his backyard. And, like I said, you watch the UFC Insider, and the guy, he has a whole other full-time job. So, I mean, that would lead me to believe he can't train as much as you probably would need to face a top 10 opponent. Doesn't take anything away from him.
Or train as hard while he's training. Yeah. He's got another job.
We understand that. All kind of, right? We have all kind of other commitments, Just a real bad performance by Mike Russo. And, it's funny. It kind of reminds me of something that I saw. I'm drawing a blank on the name. We mentioned it last week. It was when he had a come-from-behind win. Todd Duffy, that's the name. Come-from-behind win. It was like a last-minute knockout. And, I mean, he was getting literally outclassed and worked the whole fight. I pick up the Las Vegas Sun on the way home, and the guy who wrote the article literally called Russo a lummox. He had lummox. He described him as the lummox that came back, and that was in a major market newspaper. And that's, unfortunately, that's the way a lot of people see Mike Russo. His physique isn't doing him any favors.
Right.
But like I said, I don't really think it came down to physique in this one. He had a lot more to overcome.
Right.
Takes us to the main event. Wanderlei Silva, Rich Franklin. You know what? I was kind of, as a Wanderlei fan, sometimes you're a little biased. Sometimes, I just didn't want to see him deviate from the plan. That's honestly what I thought was going to happen last week. He was going to deviate from the plan just because he was fighting in the hometown, and that was going to be too much pressure. Much to my chagrin, it went all 5 rounds. I didn't see that happening in a million years.
Well, another thing that you didn't see happening in a million years was him losing a decision down there.
No, that's a great point.
When I saw that go to a decision, I said, this is going to be bad because Franklin obviously won the fight. Franklin, to me, obviously won the fight. What do they do here? Because you had even mentioned it before. Franklin's going to have to finish this guy to beat him. And
I would have bet the farm on that being the case. And you know what? I mean, just forget about Brazil. I mean, look at what's been going on in boxing. And, I mean, even in Florida last week with the UFC. I mean, anytime it goes the distance, you're like, okay, who's watching this fight and what were they looking at? You just never, ever know. Wanderlei Silva had a great second round. Dana White said, maybe you could have made a case for 10-8. That might be a bit excessive.
Yeah.
But, Wanderlei, at the end of the day, he didn't look bad in this fight at all.
No.
Honestly, as a Wanderlei fan, I would like to see him retire. I don't really think he has anything to gain by pursuing the career forward. I mean, he put in a good performance against a very credible opponent at the end of the day. Looked good in front of the hometown fans. I'd like to see him right off into the sunset, call it a day. Do you think that's going to happen?
I don't think it's going to happen. I think it should. Wanderlei has had a great career, but he has had a career that's been riddled with some brutal knockouts.
That's what makes him exciting. Win, lose, or draw, you've never seen a boring Wanderlei fight. That's
you're
for
right
sure.
About that. And I would love to see him retire, just, end it at this. I'd hate to see his last fight like Chuck Liddell, the last few
legacy
times
intact,
just crumpled in the bottom of the cage.
Yeah, you want to remember that guy proud and, with his legacy intact.
Now, what about Rich Franklin here? Rich Franklin, he looked good. He's talking about a title run again.
I think he might have just got caught up in the moment, to be honest with you, because, again, like the last show, I bring up Brock Lesnar. Guy comes back before fighting Alistair over him. He's talking about how he wants to make a run at the title. He gets folded up in the corner, and all of a sudden we're retiring. I think sometimes people get caught up in the moment. Rich Franklin and Wanderlei Silva, for that matter, they are two of probably the best cases I could think of for making a catchweight fight at 190. I mean, neither guy is quite big enough, in my opinion, for 205, simply because of the fact that guys are cutting so much weight to make 205 nowadays. And 185 is just chock full of, great wrestlers, great grapplers. I mean, it's a totally different 185.
What if they're going to eventually redo the classes? Because you get down to the lower classes and you're going every 10 pounds, and then all of a sudden you start going every 15. I wonder if eventually we're just going to go 55, 65, 75, 85.
I hope not, because you know what? It's more reminiscent of boxing, and that's a great point. I hope they don't.
I like it the way it is, actually. I hope they don't change it, but I'm wondering if they're going to.
Well, there's something to be lost, because you get up in those bigger weight classes, and that's why there's such a big draw, because people love that X factor, the knockout power, the weight difference. That's really that is the X factor. So interesting, but I hope not. I mean, we got about 8 or 9 divisions. I think that's plenty.
I think we're full.
Moving on to some of the headlines during the week, we mentioned Fabricio Werdum. He wants a rematch against Junior Dos Santos. Obviously, pending the outcome of his fight with Cain Velasquez. They still haven't even really named a timetable for that fight. And I actually think it works out great that way, because in my opinion, I don't think beating Roy Nelson or Mike Russo justifies a run at the title. Even if Dos Santos loses the title, I still, it might be a different story. It might be, a marketable fight in that case, but definitely not for a title shot. He needs a top 10 opponent.
I got to see Werdum beat somebody else. Russo, whether he had a bad night, for whatever reason, Russo looked like a guy who just came off the street. You got to see him. Werdum's got to beat somebody. Somebody top 10 before he did nothing. That, to me, that didn't raise him at all in the rankings.
He did exactly what he was supposed to do. And, you always talk about a lose-lose for a fighter like that, because if he loses, that wasn't supposed to happen. If he folds the guy up, well, that's what he was supposed to do. Big deal.
And that's a great example of a lose-lose. I think that was a lose-lose matchup for him.
Absolutely. I mean, maybe not because he did what he did in front of the home fans, but really that's about all he could take out of that fight. I mean, he did what he was supposed to do. So we'll wait and see. Obviously, everybody, you got the fighting spirit. I mean, he got cracked by Dos Santos before anybody even knew about that power and that technique. So, every time a fighter loses, he's making a mental checklist and, people that he wants to avenge that loss. So, I mean, I don't see this as being any different. Next story, Brian Ebersol. He throws his hat into the mix for the Tough Coach, Australia versus the UK, which that by itself is actually pretty interesting, because in my opinion, you think about guys from the UK, and probably a lot of you are watching on Justin TV. I think of Australians and the UK, just gritty, hardcore type of people, and so far, every fighter that I've seen come from either one of those two places, whether they're, marquee names or top 10s, every single one of those guys have been just nasty, just real tough guys to get over on. I mean, first off, what do you think about that being the matchup in Tough, and what do you think about Brian Ebersol throwing in his hat?
That being the matchup in Tough, I think is great. I predict many subtitles at the bottom. It's funny, they both speak English and we can't understand a word that they say.
Definitely.
So Brian Ebersol, I think, is interesting. It depends on the way you look at. I think that he doesn't have quite he has 50 fights. But a lot of UFC fans haven't seen a lot of him, so that might be interesting to see him come into coach. But if you are more into the big brother aspect, I always call it, of the UFC, the where they live in the house, he'll probably bring a lot to that, because he's a bit of a character. He's got quite a bit of shtick, so he'll bring that. He'll bring fans there, because I watched the fight. I wish that the Ultimate Fighter would get more into the training and the weight cutting and all of that.
A little less drama.
But they're not targeting me. They're targeting everybody else. And people want the drama, and if that's what they want, I think Brian Ebersol is a great choice for that.
I think you're right. I think he's a great choice across the board for that. And I think I heard a weird statistic that, you know, for reality television, like what they shoot at the Ultimate Fighter, it takes like, for every hour of footage you see on TV, it takes like 80 plus hours of actual footage shot.
Right.
So, you know, they have a little bit of everything. It really just depends on how they want to edit it and how. And I've always heard people say, "Oh, wait a second, I didn't come off like that. You guys, you spliced it this way and that way." Either way, I think Ebersol, I think he's fantastic from a technical standpoint. I mean, clearly with the shtick, he'd be entertaining for the drama and what unfolds in the house. But the guy is 4-0 in the UFC, 50 professional fights, maybe not necessarily against mainstream opponents, but, you know, look no further than his last fight to see what that experience does for you. The guy is notoriously hard to put away. He throws up some nasty submissions himself. He even he throws a lot of unorthodox takedowns. Just some really crazy, interesting technique that you don't see, but you can't argue its effectiveness. I mean, that guy's good across the board, in my opinion.
Yeah, and you know, a good example of somebody who was kind of known for some shtick, who came in and actually I thought did a really good job coaching was Jason Mayhem Miller. Now his fight afterwards was horrible, and his fight after that was horrible.
Yeah.
But the show, I thought he was a great coach, and I really enjoyed watching him.
He was a fantastic coach, and that should be his calling.
And I became a fan of his because up until that point, I know Daren's always been a big fan of his. I'm not a big fan of the guys with all the shtick, and it was too much for me. Hey, that made me a fan of his, and then watching him fight afterwards made me kind of less of a fan.
Well, like I said, I'm not an Ultimate Fighter mark. You know, I'm not the type of guy to go buy all the DVDs. That was actually really a fantastic seaon.
Yeah.
But I mean, just because of the way it all ended, I mean, it would make it really hard to watch 12 plus hours of, you know, knowing how it turned out. I mean, that's hard for me.
Yeah.
But I think it's you gotta find new ways to make tough interesting. I mean, they have like 14, 15, something.
Yeah,
how many
like
seasons
that.
now? It's crazy. Next, we got Ronda Rousey. I don't know if a lot of you heard Ronda Rousey. She's going to do an ESPN The Magazine pictorial. I think it's like their 4th edition of what they call artistically nude. And I don't know if a lot of you people have seen that on the newsstands. It's where a lot of not even a lot. It's the best athletes in the world. They appear, you know, artistically nude, and they show up their physique. And, you know, clearly athletes look a lot different than, you know, people like myself who eat pizza and, you know, Mexican food all the time. You know, it's entertaining. My question to you is, does this hurt women's MMA in the mainstream?
You know, I don't think it hurts it in the mainstream. I think it's going to bring more people there, but I think the hardcore fans might be a little bit, you know, I mean, of course, you know, everybody wants to you know, it's not going to be hurtful to the eyes.
No.
But
we all want to see what's popping. I mean, I'm not going to lie. But
I think it might take away a little bit from, you know, it may take away the fans taking her as seriously, you know.
You know, I could see maybe some people that maybe recently got on the bandwagon. I mean, women's MMA, you know, it's been around for a while. It's kind of gotten a bum rap, in my opinion. I mean, when we first started doing the show, I mean, Daren wasn't really a fan of it. You know, I could kind of, you know, take it or leave it, but I got to be honest, after seeing some of the matchups they put up with Ronda Rousey in particular, I mean, you're talking about a judo gold medalist. I mean, that's a whole different ballgame, and I think she makes women's MMA look good, and I think her and you know, Misha Tate, you know, some of the other women, I mean, they've really done a lot for women in the sport. I don't think it hurts them. I think maybe if she was doing a Playboy pictorial, maybe.
Well, you know, I think the bottom line is, as long as she's performing and as long as she's, you know, fighting well, I think everything's going to be fine. You take a person like Danica Patrick, who, you know, people kind of look at her as a sex symbol, but the bottom line is, she's got all these fans and all this stuff, but the results aren't there. The results are not there. And I think it's going to people are going to start to tire of that. They're going to say, well, all she is a cute face and a hot body. But
well, a lot of hardcore racing fans already are. I mean, but that's a great example on the other end of the spectrum of them using somebody's sexuality to promote them and in their favor. And that you've seen the GoDaddy commercials. I mean, it's crazy. But
I just don't want her to be compared to that. That's what worries me a little bit about something like this.
Maybe some people are going to draw those comparisons, but I also think it's fair to point out in that same pictorial, you're going to see a lot of Olympic athletes, got people that not even it's men and women that are going to be on the U.S. Olympic team here in a couple weeks. I think I even saw Rob Gronkowski that's what I heard. So, I mean, you got a lot of credible people. And like I said, it's not anything trashy. The fact that you have other world-class athletes it speaks for itself. And, you know, something that speaks for itself also is her performance in the cage.
Exactly.
So I don't think it's going to hurt her.
Yeah.
This is a real controversial topic coming up. A lot of people have probably seen this everywhere. For those of you that haven't, the soccer kick to Roger Huerta's head. it was probably one of the uglier things you'll ever see in MMA. Do you think it's bad for MMA, and should that kind of thing be outlawed?
You know, it's very funny because I don't know if you can go back in your Wayback Machine, but if you remember the very first time you guys came on to the set, you guys came on and were talking about, you know, we came on another show, talking about whether this is human cockfighting, and the argument was they have rules, they have, you know, designed to, it's more of a sport.
Right.
And you see something like this and it throws all of that out the window. It was disgusting to see a guy get kicked in the head like that. It reminded me of a bar fight.
Yeah, no, and to be honest with you, you know, sometimes people love the blood part of it. They like the gore factor. You know, some people are the exact opposite. They love the fact that it's, you know, overseen by a commission. I mean, speaking, you know, from somebody that's seen over 10,000 fights, I think that's gory. I think that's a bit much. And for me, there's two schools of thought on this one. I heard Uriah Faber and a couple other fighters. You know, it's a fine line because yes, it's ugly, but what they don't want to see is so many rules in the cage and in the ring that it takes away from the sport. So that's one school. The other school is that you don't want to see any deaths, and that's the one thing that MMA can say over boxing or anybody else is the fact that there has been no deaths, you know, in the mainstream portion of it. Maybe at the local shows, that's a totally different animal.
Okay, good point.
But you know what? You look at that soccer kick and it's ugly. I mean, you see a guy he's out on his feet. Yeah. He's not even on his feet, but he's out on his feet.
Knees.
Doesn't see it coming. I mean, it's awful for the neck, for the brain. That's the type of knockout that's literally going to change a guy's career. I mean, it's that brutal.
It's a perfect example of kicking a man while he's down.
Literally, he didn't see it coming full force. I mean, it's bad. And you know what's tough is that the ref's not even in a position. It happens so fast. I mean, the ref. I don't think the ref could do anything about that. You can't see that coming. You're not in the guy's head. The other problem with changing that, if you take that away, is that you have the 3 points of contact, and that's what you don't want to see. And you've seen guys that will literally, they see something's coming down, so they'll put their hand down. Now they got 3, so now the guy that's you know, in a dominant position, he can't do what he was intending to do, and that takes away. You don't want to see people manipulate the rules like that.
I want to see something in between. You know, maybe the one hand doesn't count, or I don't know. Come up with a different way where guys can't use the rules to their advantage, but you cannot, a guy that's on his hands and knees that is completely out, just wind up and kick him in the head is just brutal.
Yeah, it's bad for the sport.
Bad for the sport, and all the people who are on the edge or hate it are going to take that picture.
That's right.
And they're going to run it over and over and over again and say, that's why we don't want to sanction this sport.
Right, and you mentioned the sanctioning. I was just going to say New York. I mean, that's exactly the type of clip that they're all going to refer to. Right. And that's going to be what defines this incredible sport, you know, we call mixed martial arts. So, you know, I think really what it comes down to is you know, obviously it comes down to sanctioning, but I think you could probably alleviate some of that. You can get rid of people manipulating the rules if you have a good, credible referee in there. A Herb Dean, Yves Levine, John McCarthy, some of the better refs, not the hometown commission pick refs, but the better ones that would be able to advise somebody. Like in that case, don't throw a kick, no soccer kicks. They see it coming. You have the experience, you've seen it coming, or you know, you see a guy manipulating the rules. You're telling them it's okay. An experienced, credible ref, I think, would be the difference between something like that. So, real ugly. On a side note, Michael Bisping is the only guy that I could think of in recent memory that had one of the most brutal knockouts I've ever seen, and that didn't ultimately change his career the way he fought. Yeah,
you're
He's not the only example.
You know, a good example of that on the other way is Chuck Liddell. You remember Chuck Liddell, when he would get punched in the face, it pissed him off and it turned him on. And, you know, the fights against Tito, that's right. I see him get, you know, the fight's going good, Tito hits him, and all of a sudden he flips a switch. He got knocked out by Rampage, and after that, it was it. He was just, all of a sudden, he turned into, you know, he just got knocked out so easily.
Yeah, you know, but you're right. And you know what? I think for me, what it comes down to is a style of fighter. I mean, Chuck had a certain style, which earlier in his career, he was willing to eat a shot or two so that he can, you know, dispense whatever he had in his arsenal. And later on in your career, when you get that bell rung, you know, if you don't evolve, it's just not possible to fight that way anymore.
He couldn't absorb the fight. He'd get punched and he was out, and, you know, it was sad.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, look no further than the NFL.
Bisping is a great example, too, of somebody who just got his clock cleaned and he came back, although, who else? I'm losing this. Go ahead and move on, because I just lost. I had somebody else in mind, and
get a roster that deep. I mean, it's going to happen. The next story, K1
Rashad Evans.
Rashad Evans. Great
Rashad
example.
Evans, another one who got absolutely, you know, stretched, and it hasn't happened since then.
No. Two great examples. K1, they are going to hold open tryouts July 19th at Muscle Beach in LA. Is anybody excited to see this, yet another promotion to showcase some talent? The first thing that comes to mind for me is, yes, I'm a fan of K1. I like to see more competition. Competition is good for everybody. But when I think of open tryouts at Muscle Beach, for anybody that's never been to Venice Beach or anywhere else, it's the biggest melting pot you've ever seen. And by melting pot, I mean every character, every walk of life you've ever seen slammed into one beach. And on top of that, you're going to say the best guy in here is going to potentially compete for $1 million. Right. You know, if nothing else, it's going to be entertaining to see what breezes through the door in that one.
Yeah.
What do you think about K1?
You know, I haven't watched K1 for a while. I used to watch it on ESPN. Yeah. And everybody talks about this guy's a K1 level striker and all of that stuff.
Right. It used to mean something.
Yeah, it used to. What does it mean now? Especially for the more recent fans, what does K they say K what?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So maybe it will re-immerse K1 into fighting and kind of get it back on in everybody's mind, because it's been out of everybody's mind for a while.
Well, they've got a big enough prize. That should attract some attention for sure. Really quickly on a side note, you mentioned K1. Krokop is actually in there. He knocked out Ray Sefo, I think back in, I want to say it was March, and he scored another TKO. And immediately what I'm wondering is, okay, what the heck is going on over there that he's stretching people? Why is he not doing that in UFC? And I thought about that for a second. I thought, well, it's really one component of mixed martial arts, So when you're only worried about that one component, not worried about stuffing a takedown, getting submitted, I suspect it would probably be easier to prepare for something like that. Hence, you see a guy that's a lot more aggressive, a lot more confident in his striking. He's not worried about anything else.
I'm wondering if also they fight in the ring and the cage. Everybody talked about the cage. It's a different animal with angles and all of that stuff, and that's a lot of technical jargon that I don't really understand, but you hear people talk about it, and it is different shifting from a ring to a cage.
Absolutely.
Another thing, if you watch, it's a confidence level with him. If you watch him in his previous fights where he was, dominating, he just walked guys down, and he was not afraid. He showed no fear.
Yeah.
All of a sudden in the UFC, after he got stretched, he had the fear. He was tentative, and when he was tentative, his last couple fights, he didn't even throw any kicks, and that was what he was known for.
You talk about, a brutal knockout changing the way somebody fights. Anybody that is probably, I can't think of a nastier head kick than that one.
That's like getting, he broke his ankle too.
Yeah.
Whoa.
He was out so bad during that when his leg, and when you would have thought he just destroyed his ACL. He was actually out before he even hit the ground. Yep. His body wasn't tense, nothing. He literally walked away unscathed, other than the massive concussion,
Exactly. But, he was so relaxed that his ankle could twist almost 360 degrees and not break.
Well, getting kicked by a horse will do that for you. It's a real good thing for relaxing. But I can't wait to see. I can't wait to see what they turn out. K1 used to mean something. Maybe it'll mean something again. We don't know. Yeah. There's a lot of talent in kickboxing world. A lot of times we don't get to see that.
Right.
On a side note, we've got a couple more stories before we leave. Another casualty, the injury bug, Terry Edom. He has to withdraw from UFC on FX4 against Joe Lozon. Is Joe Silva going to stroke out if this type of stuff doesn't stop? What is this guy going to do? There's only so many people and cards you can pull from.
It's getting bad. And what else can they do? The problem is there's so much on the line. It's getting the guys are getting much better, which means you have to train that much harder. Mm-hmm. And it's in MMA, when the harder you train, you got to train against guys. You got to strike. You got to roll with them. Yep. And injuries are going to happen. And I hope that this is not a trend that's going to keep going. I hope that this is just like a little thing that's happening
isolated
for a
couple of years.
Yeah. When was the last time that when they announced a card and then the card actually fought, that it was all the same fighters?
Yeah.
It doesn't happen anymore.
Never happens. And like I said, I've literally been crossing my fingers, praying to God that somebody doesn't get injured on 148 that's going to take away from this card. I've seen it happen. I've paid for tickets like that, and then the main event gets changed. And
what can they do? They scramble around and
there's nothing you can do.
And you just go away feeling disappointed because some guy had to come in on short notice and he either won, and everybody says, what a great job, or he lost. They say, well, he lost, but he only had this much time to train, so it's kind of a waste. And it
takes away from the career. There's only so many. Like I said, there's so many people in the UFC roster that it only takes a handful of losses. And although the brass loves guys that step up, there are only so many losses that one could take on their record before they get sent back down to the minors. So I don't really know that there's a simple fix for that question. I really don't.
Hope this is isolated and we start trending the other way.
Got to do something. You're going to see guys start becoming superstitious like baseball. I got to wonder that's a good question for a lot of the fighters we have on. Are you superstitious? Because I would be willing to bet probably a lot of them are.
Yeah.
Last story, just kind of a side note, more or less, just about the ratings. For a lot of people who really don't care about the ratings, I mean, it's kind of, inconsequential. I mean, but the fact is, UFC on FX4 drew 1.3 million. It tied for their second best ever. UFC on FX2 drew 1.4. The reason I bring that up is because UFC 147, which is a card that you have to pay for, they have the same things leading up to try and get you to buy the fight. Watch the prelims for free over here, then buy the fight. And the prelims drew I think it was just shy of 970,000. I mean, it's substantially less than what the other free card on TV put out there. I mean, you talk about Brazil and this card being manufactured for Brazil fans. I wrote this. I brought this story up just specifically to point out the fact that these free cards they've been giving away are amazing. And really at the end of the day, I don't think the UFC lost any money. They made their money down in Brazil, and the fact is they're probably going to do 1 million buys next week on 148. So
right.
I think they're going to be all right. Do you?
I think they're going to be just fine. They're going to be just fine. I think part of it is the fact that the prelims were a bunch of people that most people, even big-time fight fans, a lot of people didn't know. The Brazil Ultimate Fighter was only available online. You had to be super hardcore. I know Daren was watching them online, and he was telling me, this is tough to watch. It was very, very hard to watch. You had to search for it. You had to find it online. They made you work for it. And when you watch The Ultimate Fighter, you kind of start to learn about these guys. You start to know them. You start to look forward to them fighting. The Brazil card, we didn't have that because most people did not watch that. Right.
And you know what? At the end of the day, like I said, they're trying to make it a global sport. They got to market it somewhere. Maybe we lost out on that one, but like I said, there's a fight every single week now. So I mean, you can't be sad for too long. And I don't think Dana and the Fertitas are going to have any problem filling up that G4 tomorrow.
I don't think there's going to be any problem.
They're going to be all right. Yeah. That's all we got for the week. Usually we do the take it to the book segment, but there's really nothing notable that I would put my money on. So I wouldn't suggest you guys do the same. So I picked 3 out of 4 on my parlay. Unfortunately, Guida didn't go all the way. Next week we'll pull out some more parlays for you. We'll talk gambling. We'll talk losing money, and all that good stuff. Facebook, Pound for Pound Sports, is where you want to find us. You can find me at Twitter, at NickPFPSports.
I'm Jason. You can actually find my new blog. It's on the website. It's Jason's 15%. Give it a read. Let me know what you think.
That was an excellent point. I'm sorry I didn't plug that in the beginning. If you love pessimism and sarcasm and overall good knowledge of the game, 15% is where you want to find it. It's going to be right on the toolbar, right there on the top, so check it out.
You can also follow Daren. He's at Daren PFP Sports.
Absolutely. And on that note, get well, buddy, and we'll see you guys all next week. Take care.
Take care.